Hi everyone, I'm Ava and I'm an American living in the Netherlands. And today I wanted to tell you about a few Dutch things that I have either been able to get used to in my time here in the Netherlands or things that I haven't been able to get used to. Now, these things are, needless to say, done very differently between the US and in the Netherlands, at least based on my experience. Now, a few of these things, for one reason or another, have just not come up in any of my previous videos. And a couple of these things I've mentioned before, and I thought it would actually be interesting to share sort of like a progress report with you, so to speak, about these habits to see whether, I've been able to get used to them or not. So as usual, I'm curious to hear about what you think. If you've had experiences with any of these things I've mentioned, feel free to leave a comment down below. I love engaging and interacting with you and, listening to your experiences as well. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is when you enter into a store or a restaurant here in the Netherlands, the first thing you have to do is kind of say hello. So this typically holds true for if you run into somebody, and that's kind of similar in the US. You don't want to be rude and ignore people. But also, when you leave said store or restaurant, you have to say goodbye. Now, that is kind of really not done in the US. It's considered pretty strange, especially if you're leaving a store, to say goodbye, unless you are having a conversation in the US with the person working at the store and you see them as you're leaving. Then you might say something. That's not how it works in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, when you are in a store, or let's say even a coffee shop, like the kind of coffee shop where you get coffee, a cafe, and the barista could be behind the bar all the way, you've had your coffee, you've drunk it, and now you're leaving. You're walking outside the door. That barista is all the way at the other end. That barista will shout out at you from across the room. I've seen this happen so many times, and just go, "Doei!" like really loudly. And then you have to respond, because if you don't, they're going to be upset. I have witnessed that once as well, where the barista was just like, okay, guess not. Like completely taken aback by the fact that the person leaving didn't say goodbye. So if you didn't know, when you're here, when you leave a store or restaurant, just find someone and say goodbye to them. Otherwise, it's considered rude. Now, when I first moved here, I absolutely was not used to this. I was the one who was considered rude because I would leave without saying goodbye, because I was like, why would I do that? That's very strange. I don't know this person. They're across the room, and it feels really uncomfortable and awkward if you're not used to doing it, to randomly start shouting goodbye at people across the room in a public place where people are just minding their own business, drinking their coffee or perusing through books or clothes, whatever. So I always felt really awkward doing that. But this is one of those things, I never thought I would say this, especially after, I feel like 2 years is not that long. I'm so used to this. I leave a store now or a restaurant and I always say goodbye. It's like second nature. Maybe it's because I've had a lot of practice. I do like going out, and I'm so used to this that when I was in the US last month, I remember being with my parents at this diner, and as we were leaving, I literally started staring down the room to find someone to say goodbye to, but everyone was busy and they were just doing their thing. But I was, watching them like a hawk, like, where are they? And then my parents were outside the door like, "Ava, you coming?" And I just felt like, what am I doing? I'm so un-American in this sense, because if there was someone standing by the door or walking past me, I would have said goodbye. Let's not be rude. But really, I was hunting down someone to say goodbye to, lest I be rude. So I was surprised to find that. And I think this is one of those habits I have shared with you before. I know I've made an Instagram reel about it, not just about this, but about some of the Dutch habits that I've acquired in my time here. So if you don't follow me on Instagram, that will be a place to check it out. I'm trying to post more on there, even though I have to say I prefer sort of the videos where I can actually talk to you a bit more. But hey, you gotta try new things in life. Anyway, with that said, I want to talk about number 2, which is the hospitality in restaurants or cafes here. I will say that the Dutch get a really bad reputation for this. There is this idea that Dutch waitstaff are just rude to you. And I feel like, yes, they can sometimes be rude, but most of the time, I will say 95% of the time, if not more, they've been nothing but nice and pleasant. And trust me, I know I love going out to eat and I love spending time at cafes, so I have mostly had nothing but good experiences. Mostly. Because those times where you have a bad experience, they really stand out to you, or where something seems off. Because in the US, those moments just don't happen unless the person working in the horeca, which stands for hotel, restaurant, cafes. If you didn't know, we learned something today. Anyway, so if you work in the horeca and if you are rude to someone in the US, I would assume that person is like on the verge of a mental breakdown, about to quit their job and like does not care. It needs to be really, really bad for someone in the US working in a service job to be rude to you. It's just how it works. Yes, it is tip based, but I also think there is something to be said about American hospitality. There's this idea of Southern hospitality. It's just not done. But here in the Netherlands, like I said, most of the time my experiences have been great, but sometimes if like the person working and serving you is not having the best day, they will show it. They're not going to put on a mask or anything. They'll just be in a bad mood. So they'll come up to you and be like, can I take your order? Or like, what do you want? And I've had this happen and I get really shocked when someone's like, what do you want? And think, okay, yeah, hello to you too. That is, I think I would say a more mild version of, being rude in the horeca here in hospitality. But I've actually had some quite bad experiences. So there was one time I was in a restaurant, completely empty restaurant, and I was there with a friend and we sat there for an hour without someone offering us the menu, without someone offering us or asking us if we wanted something to drink for an hour. Now that is so bad. I felt really upset after that. That is not an okay experience. A less bad version of it that I still think like, now this is what people mean by, people being rude, is when you're like at a busy cafe and then someone just forgets about you. Like, not even that, you're trying to get their attention to, give you the check, because that's different. It's just that they forget that, they need to ask you for your order. They forget that you're there. Maybe they thought you arrived later. And then when you remind them, they're like, okay, what do you want? There's the what do you want sometimes that you'll get. And I think, okay, that stands out to me because it's so not what I'm used to. And I think that's something that will take some time for me to not notice when I'm going out. The third thing I wanted to mention today, and I have never mentioned this, and I don't know why, but I am curious to hear if you have also noticed this in old Dutch cities. So in a city, when I'm walking around, which I like to do, yes, I like to bike these days too, but when I'm walking around, sometimes, just enjoying myself. Sometimes when I'm walking on the sidewalk, yes, the sidewalk is next to a bike lane, maybe it's a busy street. Even on these busy streets with the bike lane and the cars and the traffic, can you tell me why, as I'm walking, the sidewalk suddenly just disappears? Like, I don't understand it. You're walking, everything seems fine. It's normal. It's a normal day, normal part of town, busy part of town even. And then you're walking and there's no sidewalk. And every time I've tried to complain to my girlfriend about this, because surprisingly in Utrecht, I've found this to happen quite a lot. Like all of a sudden I'm standing in the middle of the road. It's like, what happened to my sidewalk? Like, did they just forget to build it? And I'm standing there and I look at her and I'm like, this is not okay. And then of course her response is just like, I told you we should have taken the bike. I'm like, babe, it was a 10-minute walk. And she's of course like, it would have been a 2-minute bike ride. So she's right. But at the same time, it's like, who builds half a sidewalk? You know what I mean? So I find this to be a Dutch thing because in the US, that doesn't happen. The cities are all quite new and we have the grid system and it's just very consistent. So the lack of consistency in sidewalks, those cases, still not used to. Okay, moving on to number 4, and I'm going to start off by telling you right away, this I am now used to. I'm so used to, and I would even say I'm pretty decent at it. And that is, when you're trying to get on public transport here in the Netherlands, things are a little bit different. Oh, hello, Chunky. He likes this too. He's like, I'm proud of you, Mom, for getting so used to this. Yeah, that's how I talk to my cat. I know, it's a little embarrassing. Anyway, so moving back to the thing that I was talking about. He's so distracting. In the US, when you get on public transport, you tend to form a line when you get on it. So I'm not trying to say that there's always a line before you get on the subway or that there's always a line before you get on a bus. That doesn't have to happen. I know Americans love to line. Yes, in New York, you could even be a professional line waiter as a job. It's true. But what I'm saying is that even if this line doesn't exist. You form a semi-line when you're trying to get on the public transport there. In the Netherlands, for some reason, people don't do this. They don't like forming lines in general, but then when you get on public transport, it's this whole other level of aggression. People aren't shoving each other to get on the train or the bus, but they're very much assertive and aggressive enough that they will cut in front of you, and they're not viewing you as a fellow train passenger, which generally I find is the vibe and atmosphere in this country. No, they're viewing you as a competitor for that nice seat that they want. So they're just going to cut ahead of you and go, or they're going to immediately rush to the door and stand there. And if you come in front of them, they're ready. They're just ready to speed past in front of you. And in the beginning, I was not used to this. I was always the last one on the train. And sometimes, if you live in a city like Utrecht or Amsterdam, the train is going to be full, and you're as the Dutch say, the sukkel who doesn't get the seat. And now I'm used to this. So I'm quite assertive. I'm not at the point where I'm going to cut people in line. I still find that to be rude. I'm not there yet. Let me know if you are unabashedly cutting lines. I would love to learn from you, but I'm not there yet. I don't think I would do it. But I do just go with the flow. Like, I'm not afraid to just take my place and go. Funnily enough, my girlfriend, who is Dutch but lived in the US for 5 years, now still has to relearn this. Like, she still finds herself hesitating. Maybe it has to do with her personality, but she's like, this is weird. And I think it's really funny because I had to get used to it, and she also has to get used to it now. And last but not least, the final thing I wanted to share with you today is in the Netherlands, Dutch folk, when they answer the phone, they typically answer the phone with their name. So they'll say, hello, met, first name, last name. And yes, and they do often also share their last name. I was not used to this. I didn't even know what to say when I answered the phone in English, because now I sometimes answer the phone in Dutch, but back then I would answer the phone in English and I would say hello. And I wouldn't know what to say, like what the translation of the hello with blah, blah, blah would be in English, because saying with Ava is a bit weird because you're not with me, you're on the phone. So of course there's the hello, this is Ava that I could say, but for some reason I just couldn't get used to it. Sorry, he's like really into it today. But anyway, I couldn't get used to it. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to teach myself this phrase, and every time I answer the phone, I'm going to do it. But maybe it's because I'm a millennial who gets no practice being on the phone. 2 years later, I'm still answering the phone like, hello? And then the person on the other end is like, hello? Do you speak English? What's going on? Like they're so confused because they're like, this is so not Dutch. This person doesn't have any phone etiquette. They have no manners. They're answering the phone and saying hello. Like, haven't they learned anything in this life? So it's really that strange if you pick up the phone and don't state your first name or your first and last name. And unfortunately, I'm still not used to it. I really wish I was better at this, because I told myself, this is the phrase you're going to say when you pick up the phone, but it's just not something that has become a habit that I've acquired. So those were some of the Dutch things that I was either able to get used to in my 2 years here or simply not.